So now what we have is a modified plane that we can use as a Boolean operator. Let's extrude it out like that here. Then let's drag it out over here, and now we're gonna extrude again so that we have a new segment coming out of that. And I want to merge all these vertex points here at the corners so that it becomes one vertex point only. So let's collapse that. And now the only problem is that we need to find the right position. So I'm gonna copy over the x coordinates, paste that over here to that point. And then here we're gonna do that for the z coordinates. So that way this is perfectly positioned and aligned. So now instead of having to do it on the left side, we can use the mirror modifier. And I think that this is where I realize in the tutorial that the pivot point always gets reset when we use the JMesh plugin. So what we can do instead is using the mirror modifier straight out of our modifier list. And we're gonna put it to bisect. Or you could just use the quick mirror if you still have the older version of JMesh. Or maybe it's already back into the latest version. So now I collapse the modifier, and don't be too worried about the exact position, but let's just push it back here, something like that. And now we're gonna extrude out another segment, and with the snapping enabled, we want to snap it here to that edge line. So that way we can then make a Boolean operation in a moment. But first, let's do some more work here on that Boolean operator. I'm gonna select these faces after I connected the vertex points and then simply delete it. And then let's fill that and let's connect it here also from vertex to vertex. So now I'm gonna get out of the snap mode and let's use the difference modifier on it with our Boolean. So as you can see, that gives us already a nice shape here. And before we get focused on the front side, let's be here at the back and let's give that a bevel on the edges. So I'm thinking 7 segments should do the trick here for it. And now let's select everything here at the bottom. And we want to push it a little bit further up based on the reference image. We're gonna add some steps to it as well. So there's a bit more of a depth. But before we do that, let's align this element here so that we have these steps forming up there already, where it joins down to only one vertex point. So I'm gonna position it like that here. You can compare it on your end, but that way we have already this bevel corner there. Now let's go over to the top view, select these vertex points, and I gotta undo that. I'm not in the X-ray mode. Sometimes it's difficult to see that. So now I can select everything and I wanna give it a bit of a scale there. So that way we have that a bit thinner there coming to those sides. And now let's make some connections here. We're still working on our Boolean operator. But with that connection, we can now make some extra subdivisions here. I'm gonna add 3 of these cuts. And then if we switch over here to our face mode and select that whole region, and then let's extrude down, and with Control, we then deselect each step here and do more extrusion. So let's try to make that as even as possible, these steps. It's just small steps, but that way we have now this stepping effect here. So now let's zoom in and let's select only this edge here, and then let's take it up to here. Now let's give that a bevel, and that way we can already add the next detail here. Let's just select this face here. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to select the right face. This one here, as well as all these faces here at the bottom. So what we can do with that is also extrude into it here like that. So that way we already take into account where we have this laser lens later on. Let's scale that down a bit. And then we have, of course, quite a few edges here now that we can clean up. So let's select this whole loop and let's dissolve it, as long as we still get to keep our steps there. So that way we have that already a bit more optimized. And then let's select that piece and let's apply the Boolean. So now I get an error message, and that's because we're having this instance. So we need to go here and say apply to all objects on the modifier itself instead of the JMesh. Now we can actually delete that instance. Let's only focus here on this one. And I want to show you another tool that already comes with Blender. It's called the Auto Mirror. So we can enable that. As you see, I already have it enabled. And then if you go over to Edit, you can expand it here. And now let's say we disable the cut and mirror, which will slice through it, and we simply use the Auto Mirror. It will then add an edge loop here through the center wherever we have the pivot. Let's delete the right side now. Basically, it's the same thing what the Quick Mirror did on the JMesh if you have an older version. And as you see, we have a lot of ways that we can do the same thing here. And the more we know, the better. But often they just do the same thing and look a bit different on the tools themselves. I'm gonna add this edge loop here for this limited section. And now I want to go over here to these faces, and I actually want to delete it, as well as this neighboring face here, because that's going to make it easier for us to work on the next steps here. So now what we want to do is selecting these faces that belong to these steps that we were just creating here by extruding into it. Now with that selection, let's drag that here to the left side. And let's enable our snapping so that we can snap it properly here to this vertex point there on the left, so that we have these edges aligned there. So now before we connect that, we're gonna select this loop here, and let's bevel that so that these points there once again are somewhat connected. We're gonna properly merge it in a moment. But that way we already have this pretty much aligned, and then we can dissolve these edges here. That's not really doing much for us. And now we can switch over here to our vertex mode. And while we have the snapping enabled, let's snap these points here together. So one by one. And then once we get to that point, let's simply bridge it. Let's select these two edges and fill it. And now what we want to do is select everything in vertex mode and merge it. So that removed 8 vertices. And we can also dissolve this edge here. Let's go over to vertex mode, and we want to snap this one down here. And now we have these edges here on the side coming out of that. What I want to do is select this one, and then with Control we select it all the way to here and dissolve it, but we're gonna leave these two edges there at this extruded part. Now let's just do some more connections here. Let's already clean that up. And then we're basically already working here on the optimization of that, so we don't have to do that later. So this one here we can also connect. And here we have some more vertex snapping to do. Let's connect that like this. And then these vertex points up here. So let's take another look here at this edge, and I think I want to actually dissolve that. And then we can connect it over here like that. And that way, if we look at it here from that angle, we have a bit more of a smoother edge flow there, as far as these faces are concerned. Now I'm gonna go out of the snapping mode, drag these edges up a bit, and then let's extrude to the inside like that here. We can then get rid of this face here in the center. And now let's push that a little bit like this here. This is where basically the laser is in, and that is what's illuminating this red dot. So next we can do a nice bevel here at the top. And then let's just join these vertex points back together like this here. And let's connect it, and then we can do some further snapping here. Let's snap that here, and then this one, let's just simply dissolve the edge. And then we're gonna make another connection over here. So since we are just doing these vertex connections, let's also do it here at the upper part of this. So in that case, I'm gonna select these vertex points and connect it. And we're gonna do the same thing automatically on that side here as we do that, but we had one edge that I just wanted to dissolve before we do that. So now we can do that pretty much on both sides because it's identical if we look at it from the front view. Even though at the back we have this angle on it. But as far as these edges are concerned, they are the same now on both sides. So I want to go over here and enable the bolt factory that already comes with Blender. Let's add a bolt here. So by default that looks like this. Now let's change that up a bit. Let's put that to torques, and then this one here, the hat, let's change it to a dome. So now let's increase the dome hat diameter. It's really gigantic here in our scene. We're gonna have to scale it individually. We can then change the depth a bit here to not have that so deep. And now what I want to do is select these two edges here and then simply grow the selection with Shift, Control and plus on the numpad. If you keep that pressed, it will just automatically do it all the way throughout. And then we want to go over here to select loops and say edge rings. So that way we also have it at the top. And now we press M and collapse that. So now we can do the same thing once more. Let's do that again. Then we have to go back here to our select. And as before, edge rings. And then let's collapse that once more. So now it's low poly enough. It still has enough resolution to hold up, but we don't need to have such a high poly count on it. I'm simply going to grow this selection here at the bottom. And then we don't need to have this screw part, but let me do that in a different way. I'm going to have a ring selection here, and then we can simply grow this and delete that. Delete the faces, and then we can cap it here. As well as deleting some of these edges here. These rings. I'm gonna take every second, Shift, Control and Alt, and then collapse it. And let's also do that on these two here. So the same here, let's collapse that. And now let me select every second of these edges and once again grow it. And now what we can do here is go back, select loops this time. So you can see now we have this here as a selection, and then let's dissolve that. And here let's make an inset and collapse to the center. And now we have a rather low poly screw here, or bolt. I'm not exactly sure what we should call it. And we can put the scaling down to 0.1. And then let's just simply copy and paste it to the XYZ scale. So that way it's already a bit smaller, but you can see it's still way too big. I'm gonna put it to the 0 here on the location. And that way we have it centered and we can then manually scroll it down with our scaling. Let me get out of the snapping. So you can see here on the reference image what that looks like. And then let's just scale that down like that. And let's fit that here onto our scope. So I'm gonna go here into the side view so that it perfectly touches ground. Push it over a bit here to that side. And as you can see, this bolt factory, it took a little bit of work. But now we have this nice detail done really quickly. I'm just going to apply the object transformation on everything so that we have ruled out any issues there with the transformation. And then we can put a mirror modifier on it. And let's add a bevel modifier. Let's put that down to 0.1. And let's zoom in and take a look. We have a bit of an overlap here, so I want to bring that size down. Let's put that to 0.08 maybe. Let's see what it looks like with a subdivision surface. And I'm thinking we can just leave it like that. This looks pretty good. That will definitely bake well. And now it's time to make another instance with Alt and D. So let's rotate that around 90 degrees. And then let's bring that into position here so that it fits our reference image that we have there. So I'm just going to position it a bit more. And now I want to select these edges that we have there, or we can select it by vertex. And let's drag it over here like that. So now this point, what we can do with that is bring that all the way to this line here. Now let's dissolve this edge. And that way we already have taken care of this detail there, as seen on our reference, and we can already delete the instance. Sometimes we just need it for something fast like that. And I'm not sure why it gave me this error, but we can also apply the mirror here through that menu. That way we also get to keep our pivot there in place. So now I'm gonna take this edge and I want to drag it over here. Don't worry that it intersects a little bit there on the side. Now let's make a cut like that, and then we're gonna delete this edge, which clears up this whole space. And now we can go over to Ctrl B and V like vertex to make this bevel. Let's connect it. And now let's take a look at this here. We have this overlap. Let's simply dissolve this vertex to get rid of it. And then we can continue to connect these elements here, these edges and vertex points. And we have to bridge it as well. So let's select these edges and bridge it over. And then here on that part, let's bridge it like that here. And here let's just select everything and fill it. And then we can connect it like this here, the vertex points. Now let's select these faces, and then we want to do an extrusion to the bottom. But now the problem is that we have some extra faces created here that we want to select and delete. So we have one more of these steps here to make, and this one we want to use the knife tool for in the beginning. Let's make a cut here. And this line should be pretty much aligned when we look at it from the top. Now let's bevel this vertex point here. And it looks a little bit messy. Let's switch over to face mode and then delete this selection. And then let's use the knife tool once more to cut up here and then connect it. And what we can do next is select these faces here and simply delete them. Now I'm going to extrude it out like that here on these two edges, bring that down, and then let's enable our vertex snapping and snap it here to this vertex point. And here we have to individually zoom in and then snap it like that. Now we can select it all and merge by distance. And then let's bridge it over here. Let's fill that. I'm gonna select these edges and fill it over here. And then step by step. And on these ones, let's select everything and fill that. And then we can individually select these vertex points and connect it over here. So then once we have that, let's select these faces again. And once more, we want to extrude down. Now we have the same thing as before where we have to delete these faces here in the center. And on this surface here, let's also make some connections from vertex to vertex. And these two edges here, let's dissolve them and then let's make a connection over here. So that saves us a few polygons. And the same here, let's connect it like that and then let's dissolve this loop here. And as a next thing, let's select these edge loops that we have here. And with that selection, let's drag it a bit here to that side. This is not exactly what we have on the reference image, but I'm thinking this looks just a little bit more nice to make these steps a bit more obvious. And I consider that artistic freedom. So I'm gonna go over here and let's do also some connections. And this one here, let's connect that up there. So now let's focus here on that part at the front. Let's select these edges here all the way through and let's make a subdivision. And now with this selected, let's align it. S, Y, and 0 to align. And then let's push it a little bit here to the right side for now. And let's make another subdivision then on that surface so that it has a little bit of this angle. Let me just get out of the snapping before I move that. So let's push that a little bit like here. And then we're gonna do a bevel on it. And this loop here we can dissolve. So that way we have this here with a bit of an angle. I'm gonna copy this face out, separate it out as a selection, and then let's select it and extrude it up all the way here like this. So let's make that so that it intersects a little bit. Same here at the bottom. And then also here to the sides. Let's make that so that it actually intersects. Now let's delete that face that we have there in the center. This is an important one, don't forget that. And now let's make a subdivision through the center like this. And now we can scale it. And actually this edge loop, let's delete it for the moment. Let's dissolve it is what I mean. Because then we can take these vertex points at the top and fit it so that it fits into these beveled edges that we have on the other object. Now we're gonna add it back here. So that way we have this subdivision and let's push only these vertex points here to the front. So we're doing that on both sides since we have a box. And now let's add a subdivision surface and let's see what this looks like here. So currently we have the problem that we don't have enough edges here, so I'm gonna add another loop through that. So now let's select these 2 vertex points, and then let's drag it a bit further here to the right side, and let's add the other one as well. So we're gonna just push it a little bit further to the front. And then what we can do now is select these edges here. Let's do that on both sides. And also let's take these here at the corner. So what we can do with that is add our crease to it. I'm gonna put it to 0.67. And at the subdivision surface, let's put off optimal display so that we see all our edges here in place. And then we can drag it down here like that on this axis. Wait, let me undo that so that we see it also here on the other side. So that way we can hide this geometry here and make it nice and curvy here for this kind of a detail. And at the bottom, we don't need to add that curve. Let's right click and shade smooth it. And that's basically already this glass here for that scope. Let's put on the auto smooth. So now we can concentrate here on this other element again. And let's select these 3 edges here and let's make a subdivision consisting out of 4 segments here, and then let's connect it. So let's do this, and here on that side we can dissolve these edges and then individually connect it here to the left. And the reason why we want to have some extra edges is because we're gonna make use of the proportional editing. Let's make a ring selection on that and let's turn it into faces. Let's press Ctrl I to reverse the selection, followed by H to hide everything aside from these faces now. So now let's enable this face and also proportional editing. And remember, you can either use the mouse wheel or page down to bring this size down or up. So we need to have it a certain size where we then affect the surrounding areas here. And we just want to get a slight curve there, as according to our reference image. So now we also have to take that into account here for this glass on the scope. So let's go back to this, and then we're gonna select these vertex points. And I'm gonna undo that and get out of the proportional editing. And then we can select it and push it so that it fits here within these edges here. So let's compare it here on that side. We can drag it a little bit further here. Same here. And that way this fits here. At the top, I'm just gonna leave it as it is. I only want to have this curve here at the bottom. So now I'm gonna select these faces here. And then let's make an inset. And we want to get rid of boundary so that this goes all the way through. Let me just undo that and do again. Because with control, we can then also add some depth to it. So now let's select this glass here again. And then let's push it a little bit further here so that this fits better here within this new space that we were just creating by extruding to the inside. So the same thing down here. Let's push that down. And now let's just take a quick look at it once more. So what we can do is make a ring selection here, convert to face, and then delete these faces because we will never see those. So now let's take a look at the reference image, and we want to add these holes here. So one thing I noticed is that our mirror modifier keeps telling us that we have multiple objects of the same instance, as you can see here, even though we don't. But if you hover over here, you will see that we have some number there because we had instances earlier. So we got to click on it to clear that out, and then it will behave normally. So now it's gone, and now if we want to collapse that, we don't have any more errors. Took me a while to figure that out, but the more you know. Now let's add a cylinder. Put that to 32 sides and a radius of 2 and a depth of 2. Let's rotate that around 90 degrees. And then let's snap here into that perspective to position that a bit better. And then we can drag it over here and prepare it for our Boolean operation. Make sure it's still sticking through a little bit. And then let's go ahead and use the difference Boolean on that. So let's apply it. That messes up our smoothing, so let's put the auto smooth back on. And now with this face, we can scale it down. Bring a bit closer here to the front, and then I want to copy this face, separate it out. And now what we can do is make a screw out of that. So in that case, this is not one of these screws that we're gonna be doing in Substance Painter. This is an actual 3D screw. So let's connect all these vertex points so that we have these edges going through. Then let's select everything and extrude it to the outside. And now with only that selection, we do one further extrusion. So that basically already takes care of that screw. Let's dissolve these edges here. And then let's connect it over here like that. And here at the bottom, we want to do the same thing. So that way we have this optimized already. So let's get back here to that other object. And that face here in the background, let's just collapse it down here to the center with an inset. Now what we have to do as usual is to clean that up here, as in connecting our vertex points. Gonna dissolve these edges, and now gonna make connections over here and also here on that side. These ones here at the corner left, and now one more here. Let's just do an inset on that. Collapse that. And the same here. And then we can easily just snap it, so that saves us a little bit of time. Collapse, and now with the snapping enabled, let's put that into place. It's just a little bit of a time save. This one is a bit hard to select. Let's do that again. Sometimes the snapping is a little bit complicated. Now let's select everything and weld. So next I want to add an extra detail to make it more interesting. I want to copy that face for that, separate it out, and let's put the quick origin on it. So basically just so that we have a plane that we can start with. Otherwise we could have also just created a box. But let's just do that with this plane here. And let's position it. And then let's extrude out a region. So I'm gonna add the quick origin once more to make it easier to work with. And now rotate it 30 degrees. Position it, rotate it another 10 degrees. So let's look at it from that side, and I'm actually gonna rotate it back again to keep some distance there to these other elements where we already did some extrusion. Now with the difference applied, this is looking pretty nice. I'm just gonna drag it down again a little bit further. So here we have some distance, and now let's apply that. And this is how we added another detail just to make it a bit more interesting. And then we can go ahead and connect it. So now I'm gonna go back here to this detail, grow the selection, copy it with Shift D and separate it out. And now let's make a selection here on that outer loop and hit Quick Origin so that the pivot is perfectly in the center here of this outer edge loop. Now we're gonna rotate it around like that, 90 degree. And then let's position it over here and let's put on the snapping and snap it here to this edge. So that way we have it perfectly here aligned, and then we put it to X0. And the next thing we're gonna do is select these faces and delete them. And then we select both these objects and hit Ctrl J to join them together. So now what I want to do is delete everything here on the right side. Just be careful not to delete anything we don't intend to delete. Make sure it's really only perfectly the half of it. And then we carry on here by bridging this together on one side. So now we just have to connect all of them. Let's carry on. Sometimes I like to just fill everything and then use that inset to save some time. But in that case, that wouldn't really work properly because we have this perfect circle there, or half of a circle, and we would have too much of overlapping in some areas. So I'm just gonna do it manually here. So let's continue connecting these points. These two edges here, let's dissolve them. They don't really do much for us. So these two, let's also connect them. And now let's go back here to this element and let's put the Quick Origin on it. Then let's copy it. I'm gonna turn the snapping off and put it back to 0 on the x-axis so that it's perfectly centered. And then we can already put it into place here at the top. So let's put that up here. That way we have that here in place. So now let's just go back here to this piece, and once more we're gonna grow the selection and make a copy of it. Separate it out, and then also same as before, we're gonna select these outer edges and do the Quick Origin on it, because now after rotating it around 90 degree, we're gonna also have to add this element here to this side. So I'm gonna snap it into place here with the snap mode enabled. And then let's compare it with our reference where we have that. I'm thinking this looks about right. So now here on that piece, let's connect these vertex points, and then we're gonna select this face here and simply delete it so that we can select both of these pieces and then just join them together. So same as before, this is always a bit the annoying part. We have to bridge everything, or more like connect everything. I wish there was a way where we could simply select multiple verts, you know, multiple vertex points, but the maximum we have is 2. If we select 3, it will always do some weird overlapping. So we have to do it with 2 maximum. And I guess there's just no way around it. But you know, this is just a part of the optimization. And that means that when we do that now, we don't have to do it later. So we optimize as we go. And that will save us time in the long run. We just make sure our model is as good as it can possibly be before we even get to the high poly part. So let's also connect this one here. And here on that surface, we also have some open things that we can connect. And same as here, while we're at it, Let's connect those and then these ones here as well. So now this is starting to look pretty nice. We have the basic shape already in place. And now let's add back our mirror modifier. And zooming in reveals that our merge threshold is too big. Let's put that to 0.01. This is very important. Or else we have too much welded where we don't want it. So always make sure to double check for that. So next, let's make a cut here with a knife tool. And let's confirm that. And somehow I thought it was cutting through both sides. So here I'm dissolving this edge, but you don't have to do that. Just leave it like it was. But what we want to do is connect these vertex points here. And then we can select these faces. And I want to get out of the snap mode. And then let's extrude it out a bit here. So that is also what we have on the original reference. And then let's continue by adding a cube. And I'm gonna put it to 19 millimeters. I already measured it, and as you can see, 19 millimeters fits perfectly. On the Z dimension, I'm gonna put it down to 9. And then we have our X dimension. We can put it to 2 millimeters. And then let's push that over here. And that's gonna be the foundation here for this button. I'm just gonna apply all transforms on it. So basically reset X form to rule out that we have any scaling issues. And then we can continue to make a nice bevel here around all these corners. Next, let's push that further back out here, followed by an inset. And now let's scale it so that basically at the top and at the bottom, it's almost the same. And then we push it further out like that, followed by another extrusion. So now I'm gonna do another bevel on it. Let's give this 3 segments here to make it nice and round. And then I'm gonna collapse these edges here at these corners, because we don't really need to have that there. That way we save some poly count here, and it's still doing the exact same thing. So now, of course, we also have to work on these circular elements, and let's just reuse what we already have in place here. Let's copy out this part, separate it, and then again, let's put the quick origin on it. And let's simply drag it over here and scale it so that it fits. So let's put that also here to the front. So now let's switch over here to our face mode, and we want to extrude that out like this here. Position it. And now let's go back here to this piece and let's make a subdivision through it in the center, and let's just delete the right side for now. So just make sure to fill that empty space, because now what we're gonna do is make a Boolean operation. And that usually works best with objects that don't have any opened areas. So I'm gonna apply that, put the auto smooth on, and then on this circle here, let's give it a scale, so that we already have this bevel in place there. And then what we can do is, as usual, do some vertex connections here. Let's connect that, and then whenever we're done with that, we can simply mirror it over to the other side, because these elements look exactly the same on both sides. The only thing that we still have to do individually is make a floating detail, one that points up and the other one that points down. So now we have that connected. Let's make sure to actually delete that face again. And let's put the quick origin here in the center, and then let's put the mirror modifier back on. And we want that to be on the y-axis here. So I'm gonna apply the mirror modifier, and then let's make a copy here of this element and separate it out. Put the quick origin on. And just so that we see it better, let's push it a bit to the front. I'm gonna dissolve this vertex in the center, and then let's make a connection like this here so that it looks like a triangle. Then we can delete the faces that surround it, and we're only left here with this triangular shape. Let's scale it down a bit, and then we want to do an inset on it, which we can extrude out like this here. I'm also gonna scale it down a bit. And then let's apply the bevel modifier on that. I'm gonna put it to 0.15. And this seems to be working quite fine. So let's just increase a bit the segment count to make it nice and round. We don't actually have to apply a subdivision surface on it. This is already high poly enough that way. Let's just copy it. And then here on that side, let's make sure it's as centered as it can be. And then we want to rotate that around 180 degrees and also position it here on this circle. So now let's also add a bevel modifier here to that piece. I'm gonna put it to 0.1, and it seems like it's already working quite well the way it is. So we don't even have to add like any weighted edges or anything like that. This is just based on the angle now here with the bevel modifier. And with a subdivision applied, this already does the job here for it. So now let's focus on that part here. Let's separate that out, and then let's select it, and let's just put the quick origin on it so that we have it here at 0, most importantly at the x-axis. I'm gonna dissolve these edges here that we don't really need there. And then let's see how we best approach this shape here. First of all, I'm gonna have a subdivision at the top. And then let's zoom in here from the top view and let's push that out around here for this selection. I'm gonna delete the right side so it's easier to work only on one. And let's also delete the bottom, so we're only focusing on the side for now. Let's drag this over here so that these lines here are aligned on that angle. And then over here, what we can do is make a bevel. So it doesn't have to be quite far stretched. So let's just use this vertex point then with the vertex slide and make that aligned here on this edge. So that would be step 1. Now let's put a new collection here and let's get a bit more organized here, because currently we don't have the whole scope in any extra folder. I'm gonna right click that, say move to collection, and then select this scope folder that we just created. So that way we have this all here in one place, and same for our revolver and the bullets. So speaking of our revolver, as I was mentioning earlier, this scope is a little bit out of place here. So in order to match that, we have to select everything, drag it up a bit here. So this looks about the right position here. And then let's select this rail. And what we can do now is take that into isolation, switch over here to our face mode, and we want to select these elements here. Let's also select these faces. Let's make a copy and then separate it out as a selection. Now let's select this, and I'm gonna switch over here to vertex mode, select these vertex points and align them, and the same here on that side. Now what we can do is select the edges here on the right side, and then let's extrude it out, snap back and drag it out all the way, and then we can delete the left segment. Now let's select this edge at the bottom and also extrude it, snap back, and let's drag that down here, and then once more extrude, and let's put it to X0. On the top we also want to put it to 0. And then what we can do is fill it up here. So the same thing we want to do on the other side. So over here, let's also join that. Let's fill that, I should say. So that way we have the perfect Boolean operator here to cut into our mesh for the scope here. So let's select the center edge on the top, and I want to apply the quick origin on it, just so that we can navigate this around better. Let's take both elements into isolation mode, and then let's take that piece, and we have to put the mirror modifier back on it. Let's collapse it. And then let's simply fill it up at the top and at the bottom. Now let's go back to that piece. Let's select everything and merge by distance. It still had some unwelded parts. I'm gonna dissolve this edge, apply our mirror modifier, and now let's delete these faces here. And let's extrude out an edge here like that, snap back, and then let's bring it down, and let's simply fill it like that. The perfect position doesn't really matter in that case, because it will do the job here for this Boolean operation. If you look at the reference image, you will see that the left side doesn't have this same shape that we have on the right side. So that's why we had to take that into account. So here we see it from the front. And now what we can do while we have the Boolean operator selected and still active is to go into our transparency mode, and let's just give it a subtle push here so that it's not perfectly in place but has a little bit of a wiggle room there. So now let's apply that, and that means we now have this shape here cut out and we can focus on the next part. So one thing I want to do is select our reference image and let's push it up so that it actually matches again. Because earlier we were pushing the whole scope up. So now we have that back into place. Let's align that here. I mean the reference image. And since this is already the case, let's just make sure we have these points here also connected. Let's join that. Also this one here, let's join this down. And then here on that side, let's also make these connections. Same here on that. So now we have this in place. Let's start on working on that shape.